What's up, hockey fans? It's the Deep Janda for Inside the Game on Hockey Night in Canada, Punjabi. And this week, I am joined by one of the best people in hockey. You know him, you love him. 32 Thoughts, the Jeff Marek Show on Sportsnet Radio and podcast, of course. Sportsnet's very own, and a big fan and supporter of Hockey Night in Canada, Punjabi. Jeff Marek. Jeff, what's going on?
I have been from day one, and I am so flattered that I'm finally able to be on the show. And with all those compliments off the top, it sounds like I wrote a card for you. And if so, you read it just like I wrote it, Randy. Thanks so much, buddy.
No, it comes from the heart. That's why it's something that it just comes right off the tongue. But no, I appreciate it. First of all, I do want to give you a shout out because we started the show way back when. I wasn't even involved back then, but
Yep.
since then you've been whether it was one of our previous colleagues, Amrinder, who you went to university
Yes.
with, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken,
Yep.
Harn Ryan, of course, and the 2.0 edition of Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi. When I joined up, you've been a
Yeah.
supporter from day one.
Well,
Thank
listen,
you.
well, listen, my pleasure. And I can remember the day ones because I would see Harn Ryan every week, and it would be the stories of like sleeping in airports and getting a nap here and grabbing a meal here and red eyes and all this sacrifice for what was then and still is, it continues to be a growing, great, and important property. Like we always talk about growing the game of hockey, and when I hear the word hockey, I think capital H hockey. I don't think lowercase hockey. And capital H hockey encapsulates everybody, what not just one slice of what might be a traditional viewership. So, like, I love this. I wish there were more properties like this. This is cutting edge. This is brilliant. And I love the way, and I've always said this, I've always said this about your broadcast. I love hearing the way the game is called, and I think great broadcasters sing the game more than they call the game. And this is a property that sings the game. It seems lyrical to me. Like when I go back and listen to Danny Gallivan, like Danny Gallivan sang the game of hockey. And to me, that's what is most attractive to this property. I may not understand it, but it doesn't matter because to my ears, I love the way that this sounds. And I think more people should pay attention to it because it's always good to grow your universe, and understand that hockey doesn't have to look one way and doesn't have to sound one way either. It's a big, big goldfish bowl that has room for all of us to swim in. So, to you guys, marvelous work.
And you mentioned all of that, and entry points to the game. Everybody has a different one. So
Totally,
we're in a situation
totally.
now. I'm actually wearing.
What was yours? What was your entry point?
Well, it was for me. It was the Vancouver Canucks. I grew up in Vancouver. I still live out here, so it was ball hockey. It was
Yep,
hockey cards. It was. I'm actually
yep.
wearing a picture of Robin Bawa. I have a
Nice.
T-shirt there, so he was an entry point for me as well. So those are my entry points to the game, and I think we've come to around in society now in hockey culture to celebrate those. Before it was maybe held against you that you were potentially not a conventional hockey fan, if you want to put it.
It's
Now it's
better.
like, no, let's celebrate them.
It's better. It's way better now. It's
Yeah.
way cooler now. It's more interesting. Like this is one of the reasons why like I love the NHL Global Series, for example, because I like the NHL game. Like these are the best athletes in the world. I love the NHL game put in different environments in different countries. We always talk about hockey culture, and there's not just one type of hockey culture. You go to games in Prague and it's different than you go to games in Helsinki, than you go to games in Stockholm, etc. And every fan base has their own. Like, look at Latvia, for example. I still maintain that Latvians are the best hockey fans in the world. They'll show up, and a lot of them will show up. If they're winning, that's great. If they're losing, well, that's great too. It doesn't matter. We're here to sing, we're here to chant, we're here to have a good time. And it's almost as if like the scoreboard is secondary. And listen, you talk about, opening up borders, open up borders mentally as well, and allow people to be part of this. And there's only one thing that can happen. A, your game can grow, and B, your game can get better and more consistently interesting. And that's, again, I come back to Hockey Night Punjabi here. Is such a tremendous property for that and a great reflection of and a great acknowledgement of there is this entire community that people that look like me, I'll be blunt, have ignored for way too many years. And finally, we're letting part of that cool culture into hockey. It's always been there, but now all of a sudden, finally, we're saying, you know what? We can learn from this and it makes the game itself better. So bravo. And anytime we can take the NHL and put it in different cultures and different countries, I'm all for it.
Love it. And I just realized, Jeff, this is your first appearance on Hockey Night in Canada, Punjabi as well. So there we go. It took 15 years,
I
but
never,
we
I
got you on the show.
never, I never wanted to push. I always, even going back to the old days, like, hey, Hunter Ryan, you think I can kind of like nudge in and kind of like do something? I never like, no, to know your place, know your place. Don't try to, to nudge in on someone else's property here. But I'm flattered, man. I really love this.
Awesome, awesome. All right, let's talk some hockey as well, because you
Okay.
mentioned hockey culture and every fan base in North America, as well as developing their own. We see what goes on in Vegas, Nashville.
Yep.
This week, the news came out that Anson Carter and a group is pushing for expansion in Atlanta.
Yep.
Third time's a charm, hopefully, if this does happen. Can it work? Is this a market that the NHL should consider again?
I understand where people will say, hold on a second here, going back for a third time. And here's why it will work. And I really do think it will. Just like I think Salt Lake City will work. Just like I think, like Kansas City or Milwaukee or Quebec City, if they ever decide to go back to reinvent the Quebec Nordiques, will work. The expansion draft rules allow you to be a good team right away. And we saw this obviously with Vegas, who went to the Stanley Cup final in their first season. And then in year two of Seattle's existence, they made the playoffs. They knocked off the defending Stanley Cup champions. When I was making this point on the podcast that came out on Friday morning, Randeep, when the book is written, like when the book is written on what hockey was post salary cap, the number one sea change was the cap itself. Coming out of that CBA and the new relationship between revenues and player compensation. That's number one. And I'll maintain when you look at how the game has grown financially since there, the other big step was redoing the expansion draft rules. So as an expansion team, you didn't have to suffer through 10 years. I remember, it's funny, I remember having this conversation with Doug McLean. I'll tell you this. I had this conversation with Doug McLean because he went through an expansion draft with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I said, so Doug, tell me here, when you go through an expansion draft, what's your goal? Like once the expansion draft is done, what's your goal? And he said, honestly, to get rid of all the players you just drafted so you can actually start to put together your team. And one by one, you start to get rid of all those guys. Now, that's your team. And it's a competitive team. Now, you're not guaranteed playoffs, but you're given a really good shot at it. And there's nothing worse for an expansion market because you take all of that excitement and then the team is awful. And so the fan base feels like they've been false started. Like, hey, I'm supposed to be excited about this. This team is awful. Like this team is terrible. So I think the expansion draft rules and also, how much of a growing sports economy there is in Atlanta, how much the population base has grown since the Atlanta Flames, even since the Atlanta Thrashers have been there. If I'm the NHL, I am optimistic certainly about Atlanta. And guys love living there too. I think that certainly helps. And when you have someone who's as vocal and popular and front-facing as Anson Carter, that can only benefit. One thing I think that should be part of this conversation, long-winded answer here. One thing that I do think should be part of this conversation is, TNT is a major partner with the NHL, and having an anchor team where TNT is, I think only makes sense. If they're going to keep, and this has been a good relationship between TNT and the NHL, if there's going to be a long-term future between those two sides, it does make sense to have a team in Atlanta. So no surprise, there were at least two and maybe a couple of more parties interested in bringing a team to Atlanta.
Yeah, we've heard about Salt Lake City as well. Of course, you and Elliot
They
Friedman have done
will.
a lot of work on that front in terms of sharing the news before it became news. So some
Yeah.
competition. You mentioned Quebec City. Kansas City is always thrown in there just sometimes as more of a leverage spot than anything, but that's another
Yeah.
city that's interested. So plenty of
Yeah.
options for the NHL. I'm curious to see what Gary Bettman and Bill Daly have in their mind, but it's all about this as well, that franchise fee.
Listen, I mean, was it 500 for Vegas, 650 for Seattle? You just saw what the Ottawa Senators just got sold for. So we're talking billions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, my
Like
heart says Quebec City, Jeff, but my mind says another city we haven't mentioned thus far is Houston. Like the market that is there, you also have to consider that one. So we'll see what happens on that front, but plenty of options for the
Yeah,
NHL and the owners. All right, let's talk some playoffs here. I want to
sure.
exciting in both conferences for very different reasons. In the West, you've got essentially a bit of an arms race here at the deadline, where a number of teams did
Yep.
their business early on, like the Vancouver Canucks, and then Vegas loaded up, Colorado loaded up, Dallas got the best right shot defenseman. Of those teams, which is the most dangerous to you as of right now, as the time of recording? Who's that team that you look at and say this is going to be a lot of trouble in the playoffs?
Nashville.
Okay, all right. That is not
So,
an answer I considered, but
and they're a wild card,
having
and
listened to your show, I'm not
they're
surprised.
they're a wild card team. But like right now, like we've talked, Randeep, like all season long about in the Central. Like, again, teams always want to finish first. I get that. But the idea of facing, like, say you're Colorado, the idea of facing Dallas or Winnipeg in the first round is not something you want to contemplate until, if you're Colorado, and as we record this, Colorado's on top of the Central Division right now, and you look, okay, so what's worse? Do I want to play Winnipeg as a 2-3? Do I want to play Dallas as a 2-3? Or as a number one in the Central, do I really want to play Nashville right now? One of the hottest teams in the NHL, one of the top teams in the NHL. The defense is still fantastic with Roman Josi and Ryan McDonagh and Jeremy Lauzon. Like, it's really, really good. Now they're getting some goal scoring. They had a really good trade deadline. I don't know. They're really well coached. What Andrew Burnett has been able to do with this team, and I know we make a lot about, him canceling the U2 trip to the Sphere after that 9-2 loss against Dallas, and everybody sort of refocused, and now they're amazing. To say nothing of having UC Saros in net. Like I can't help but think, like, maybe, like, again, this may all change by the time April rolls around. I'll give you an entirely different answer. But right now, I don't want any part of Nashville. I really don't want to touch the Nashville Predators at all. Like I've said all along, I like Dallas. And I do. I just don't love the goaltending right now. And as we record this, Jake Ottinger has a sub 900 save percentage. Sources say not good. But if that can course correct and sort itself out, then I would say that that the answer could dovetail quickly to the Dallas Stars. How's that?
Yeah, Nashville, their defense, their ability, like Luke Shen, you've got Ryan McDonagh there, Lauzon,
Yep.
who's been playing exceptional this year in terms of just being a physical presence. What's the
Yep.
playoffs all about? It's getting to the middle of the ice. And if those 3 or 4 defensemen are plugging up the lanes, kind of like Vegas did last year,
Yeah.
Winnipeg's done a good job of that in the regular season. Vancouver, to a certain extent as well, being one of the better defensive teams. Yeah, that defense is not going to be easy to get through.
And listen, Roman Josi, like every time Nashville plays, you grab the game sheet after the game. It's like, oh yeah, Roman Josi 2 goals, 1 assist. Oh yeah, Roman Josi 1 goal, 2 assists. Oh yeah, Roman Josi +6. Or like it's incredible. But Hal Gill, I had him on the radio show a couple of weeks ago, and he brought up a really good point about Ryan McDonagh specifically. And he said, if you look around the NHL, like Ryan McDonagh is not Cale Makar. He's not Quinn Hughes. He's not Adam Fox. He's not going to be that guy. He's not Victor Hedman, but he defends really well. And the one thing that we've seen in the Stanley Cup final every year, the team that wins is the team that defends well, whether it's Vegas, whether it's Tampa, whether it's Colorado, whether it's St. Louis. Like, take your pick. Like, if you defend well, that gets you a ticket in. And he said, you look at the one player in the NHL who gets back to position quickly. He said, that's Ryan McDonagh. Like, Ryan McDonagh knows who he is and knows what he can do. We focus so much on blocking shots, and that's true. Like, McDonagh eats them. He's really smart about it. Like, he's a really effective shot blocker in that, by and large, he's able to stay relatively healthy. But the one main skill that McDonagh has, and you talk about controlling that lane down the middle of the ice, he gets back to position fast, and he defends really, really well. To me, he was the one last piece that Tampa couldn't afford to lose, because every year Tampa would always have to jettison players because of the salary cap. I always thought the guy was going to be Andre Palat, the mini Marian Hossa, as I used to always call him. Like, you can't let go of Palat. Palat's going to kill you. You lose Palat, everything's going to fall apart. Turns out it was Ryan McDonagh. And they thought that Sergachev can slide in that spot and do Ryan McDonagh things. Not a chance. Like, when you look at Ryan McDonagh and what he does and who he is, how many more Ryan McDonaghs are out there?
Yeah.
Spoiler, there's none like Ryan McDonagh.
Yeah, what makes it shocking, it was also a salary dump move as well. So you
That's it.
essentially said, hey, take him off our hands. We don't need him.
And he didn't want to go. And he didn't
Yeah.
want to go. Like that, like trust me, like Julian Breezeball had to like twist his arm to get him to Nashville. And again, like I think Nashville is a wonderful story. I really like the organization for one, like a lot of really good, decent people work in that organization, and you want to see it rewarded. Ryan McDonough's one great story. Yossi, Ryan O'Reilly is another great story as well. A lot of good young kids on that team. It's like it's Tommy Novak, one of the more underrated players. Like
Yep.
it's a good team. It's a good story. You mentioned Lozon. He's probably going to break Matt Martin's, hit record. What's the number? I have it. I actually have this stat written down
This
here.
is in the show notes. I got it.
Actually in the show notes. So Lozon
Okay.
right now, as we record, 321 hits. The record is 382 by Matt Martin of the
Okay.
New York Islanders. He'll probably set that if he stays on pace. I think he's on pace to break it by 10 or 15. So a lot of good stories. Long-winded way of saying, yeah, Nashville scares me right now, bud.
I like that sleeper pick though. Okay, so quickly in the West, or sorry, we just did the West. We'll do the East as
Yep.
well. Six teams, seven teams essentially duking it out for one or two playoff spots, right? If you take the
Yep.
third spot in the Metro and the two wildcard spots, you've got three spots there. You've got seven teams trying to jockey
Yeah.
for position. Detroit's in a very difficult situation right now, losing seven in a row. They don't look good, but they're still in the thick of it. If you had to
Yep.
say one or two teams that you believe in out of that group right now, jockeying for position, do you have a pick or two?
I can't because no one wants like the way you frame that kind of gives me my answer. And the answer is I don't have faith in any of them because none of them want to grab it. Like you look at the Islanders, for example. Okay. Like the Islanders this week, like they had a chance to really strangle that spot. They go in there against Los Angeles, they lay an egg, they get shut out. Okay. Still 5 up on the Buffalo Sabres. Playing the Buffalo Sabres, if you win in regulation, all of a sudden you've put yourself that far away from the Buffalo Sabres. It was a 5 point gap. It could turn into 7. What happens? They're outshot like 15-3 in the first period. They're never in the game to begin with. And now all of a sudden the gap is 3. And oh, yeah, they got shut out as well. So they get shut out by the Kings and they get shut out by the Buffalo Sabres. Is that a team that has any kind of killer instinct to you? It doesn't to me. And I'm sure it doesn't to any of your viewers right now either. And you mentioned the Detroit Red Wings. Are they technically still in it? Yeah. But you have Sherratt and Raymond fighting in practice. This team can't win. And all of a sudden now they've lost to the Arizona Coyotes twice in 2 weeks. That's not a team that has any kind of killer instinct. Like 5 minutes ago, we were talking about how it's going to be great to see the playoffs again in Detroit. And now we're saying, like, are they going to win a game? Like you mentioned, they're going 7 games the wrong way. Are they going to pull it together? You look at the Washington Capitals a couple of weeks ago, their general manager very publicly on that Saturday afternoon at the press conference throws in the towel on the season. This is all just about the kids. We know all about the woes with the New Jersey Devils. Big win for them on Thursday against the Dallas Stars. Jake Allen didn't look great early, 2 goals on 3 shots, but he turned things around. But I mean, even that's a long shot. You have to really squint hard when you look at the standings and say, maybe I can see New Jersey. The one thing we do wonder about, and I wonder about too, are the Philadelphia Flyers. And can they really continue to do this? It's been tough. The John Tortorella suspension is now over. We'll see if things change. But I wonder if the clock is beginning to strike midnight on the Philadelphia Flyers and someone can slide into that spot. But to the point about who do I like? None of them, because none of them have shown any type of killer instinct. It's been there for them, and no one has been able to grab
You're a wrestling guy. This kind of reminds me maybe of like a hypothetical scenario of it's the Royal Rumble, the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference, or Andre the Giant. Like, who's gonna throw them over the ropes? It's
Yeah.
certainly, and right. If I had to say, like the teams that we mentioned, they're kind of like dink and doink. You don't believe in them. They're not
They're coming in, they're getting thrown out.
exactly.
5 seconds in the rumble. I'll tell you what, did you see how Carolina handled them on Thursday night?
It's impressive.
Like and that listen, you add Gensel, Kuznetsov has been such a tremendous story for this team. Great to see him score that goal, and the bird is back, and do the bird storm surge afterwards. Like he's had a lot, we all know he's had a lot of problems off the ice. And I'm one of these people that believes that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to really blow it today. I'm just going to really, throw a wrench into the spokes here in my life. But it seems as if that hockey community, that team, those fans have really embraced them, and it feels like it's almost a home there right away for Kuznetsov, and you're seeing it on the ice, and they're playing him with Gensel. and Martin Necas. And by the way, the irony of a Pittsburgh Penguin player and a Washington Capital player coming together to try to get the Carolina Hurricanes back to Stanley Cup glory, I don't think should be lost on anybody, as both Washington and Pittsburgh take a downturn in their evolution.
It kind of reminds me of that iconic shot of Macho Man shaking hands with Hulk Hogan. It's right. The two
Grudgingly,
rivals come
yes,
together
that's
for that
right.
legend. It's kind of like that.
I love how you're dragging in wrestling
I,
analogies here on all my answers. I really do respect it, and I really do love it. Let's see who plays the role of George the Animal Steel, eating turnbuckles and stealing Miss Elizabeth from Randy Macho Man Savage. But we'll park that conversation for a couple of seconds here. Carolina might be the team that gives the Florida Panthers the most fits. They played against each other last season. This is an improved Carolina Hurricanes team. Like it's a very Carolina thing to take a long shot, take a flyer here on Yevgeny Kuznetsov. And they got him at a very good price, as we all know. I do like that they broke their tradition of not acquiring rentals at the deadline, and they did so with Jake Gensel. If there's going to be one, it was good to see Freddie Anderson return with a shutout, his first shutout of the season. If he can keep the hospital bracelet off, all of a sudden that changes the dynamic there. I wonder if Carolina's a team, because I've been like you, Randy. Like I've looked at Florida and said, class of the East, full stop. The battles for second place. Now you look at how Carolina's playing. I'm starting to wonder if maybe Carolina's a top team in the East.
Yeah, this is a team that plays a certain style, but now they've got that star power, that game breaker element as well,
Totally.
in addition to Sebastian Aho and Svechnikov. So
Yeah,
looking forward to it. It's March 15th. We're not that far away, a month left
I
in the
know.
season as time of recording. So Jeff, it's the first time. It sure as heck won't be the last time, as long as your schedule allows it. Thank you very much
Please.
for joining us on Hockey Night in Canada, Punjabi, and thanks for always supporting as well.
It's the first time, and I got to tell you, anytime you call, I'm here, man. Love the show. Love your crew. Best to everyone watching and best to everyone behind the scenes. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks very much, Jeff. And thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time. You know, Saturday nights is Hockey Night in Canada, Punjabi, but also make sure to follow us on our YouTube channel. We got content there. Thanks very much. Until next time.